Welcome back to the Fight Society podcast. I am your host, Damon Martin, and today we are not talking necessarily about mixed martial arts for the entire show, although we will be back later this week for a show dedicated to mixed martial arts and, of course, UFC 210 next weekend in Buffalo. But this weekend, on Sunday night from Orlando, WrestleMania returns, and so today's podcast is a very special one because we're going to talk to a good friend of mine. His name is Paul Heyman. You all know him. He works with Brock Lesnar, of course, former UFC champion. He works with he used to work with current UFC fighter CM Punk, and he's a big mixed martial arts guy. And with WrestleMania at this point 6 days away, I couldn't resist getting him on the show to talk about Brock, to talk about Goldberg, to talk about Ronda Rousey, to talk about Conor, to talk about everything that's been happening in the world of professional wrestling and, of course, mixed martial arts as well. There's no better man in this sport to give a promo than Paul Heyman, and I figure what better way to talk about WrestleMania, especially considering Brock Lesnar is in the main event on Sunday night against Bill Goldberg, than to talk to his humble advocate, Paul Heyman. So without further ado, let's get to the interview where we talk with Paul Heyman on all manner of different subjects. So enjoy this interview. We'll be back with more mixed martial arts talk with the second show later this week, so stay tuned for that. But for now, let's talk WrestleMania with the great Paul Heyman. With WrestleMania only a matter of days away, we welcome into the show today a very good friend of mine, an icon of the professional wrestling industry, and the humble advocate for former UFC heavyweight champion and potentially future WWE Universal Champion, Paul Heyman. Mr. Heyman, how are you, sir?
No, if you only started out with ladies and gentlemen, I would never have to introduce myself again.
I tried to do you proud. That's what I was trying to do right there.
Well, and allow me, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman, and for those of you tuning in only based on my star power, I welcome you to this podcast, and especially to the host, a reporter for whom I have nothing but respect and very little of that, Damon Martin.
Well, sir, I gotta say, we've got another big event coming up, and WrestleMania is right around the corner. At this point, how many WrestleManias? Do you even keep count of how many WrestleManias you've been to at this point?
I haven't. Here's something that's actually very ironic. I haven't been to all that many. The first one I actually attended was the one that I commentated on with Tim Ross, JR, in 2001 when I first went to WWE, which was Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Rock. I attended the other ones in 2002, 2003, 2004. I didn't go to 2005. In 2004, when I was in various roles on the writing team or the lead writer of SmackDown. And then the next one that I actually went to was, and I didn't perform at anyone. I never was in anybody's corner at a WrestleMania until 2013 at MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, when I was in CM Punk's corner against The Undertaker and in Brock Lesnar's corner against Triple H. And then I've obviously been on 2014, 15, and 16.
Yeah, that's great. You know, it's funny, 2001, that's the first WrestleMania I ever attended.
So we popped our cherries together.
We did. That was a great event, too.
Yes, it was. I mean, it was a real historic event in many ways because, to me, it was the last event of the Attitude Era. Even though WWE had significantly toned down their product already, it was the end of the Attitude Era. WCW had just been purchased earlier that week by WWE. ECW was in the process of going into bankruptcy. I was already on board, and it was the end of the Austin Rock era. Rock was going off to start shooting movies very soon, and this is where Austin had done everything that he possibly could as the anti-hero and was going villain. So it was truly the end of the Attitude Era and the beginning of WWE looking for its new identity.
This is going to sound like probably a bit of a dumb question because, coming from ECW, which I know we've talked about numerous times, I was a huge fan. Do you miss the Attitude Era? Because I hear a lot of fans in this day and age kind of wish for that Attitude Era to come back. I know you can never really relive the past, but, that kind of era was really iconic for professional wrestling and for WWE.
I'm the wrong person to ask that question because I never look back. It's just because it serves me no purpose to do so. And I use this analogy a lot, but sharks only move forward. They don't swim backwards. They don't go sideways. Sharks only move forward, and when they stop moving forward, they die. Life is way, way, way too short to spend time missing things that you can't bring back. And in today's political climate, and I don't just mean the Senate and the Congress and the presidency. I mean in the television and distribution world and the political climate surrounding that, and in advertising and in marketing, the Attitude Era is not coming back. It's just not. What made the Attitude Era so great was the fact that it was finding new ways to present the product. And there was something wild and different and innovative every week. It's not just the fact that people would curse or crotch chops or all the assorted things that are severely R-rated, because we were doing that in ECW as well. But I felt towards the end of ECW that it had reached its peak, that that the shock value had satiated the appetite, and that something new was needed to be presented and promoted anyway. I understand why people have such an affinity for the Attitude Era, but I think it's also the excitement that they got caught up in. The same way, if you talk to older fans, they will bask in the glow of how it was so great during the San Martino era, or for fans not quite that old, the Jim Crockett Promotions 1985 to 1987 run, or the World Class era when the Von Erichs were the hottest things in the company. So again, it's also a matter of where you were at that time. And for people who lived through the Attitude Era and were in that age demographic of watching sports / pro wrestling at that time, it reminds you of a great time in your life. So, and again, you talk to any kid who grew up as a Hulkamaniac, they'll tell you that was the greatest era as well. It all depends on what memories it triggers for you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, because I always reminisce, and I know we've talked in the past about ECW, like that to me was my favorite time of wrestling. I remember when I started working with Les Thatcher, and years and years and years ago, and I told him that I wanted to model myself after an ECW guy. His hair was blown back because he was such an old school traditionalist guy. And I remember going to like Heatwave and Dayton and those things, but you can never relive that. You know what I mean? That was such an iconic point in time, such an iconic moment. You just can't relive it. But I will always remember those moments fondly, because that to me was like the greatest time in professional wrestling history. Those moments.
Yeah, but it was also how old you were at the time, and the excitement of things happening around you at that time, and probably all the hookers and the beer that you were bringing to Dayton with you, for that event at that time in your life. When something is really new and really exciting, it's tough to match it, because it also, even in your own mind and memories and imagination, the legend of it within yourself grows in time, because again, it was a wild time for you. It was a younger experience for you, and now that it's 20 years later, it's difficult for you to reach that same period of euphoria, because you're 20 years older, you have things on your mind, you have deadlines to meet online, news is breaking at every minute that Fox Sports will call you and say, hey, chase down McGregor, get an exclusive quote, hey, you got to go out to Vegas and interview Mayweather, you got to get a podcast up online to preview WrestleMania. It's different than just saying, wow, what do you want to do today? Well, let's take 3 hits of the bong and head over to watch ECW Heatwave. Yeah, man, that's great. And, man, and New Jack will beat up the Dudleys, and Tommy Dreamer will fight for the cause, and the Sandman will make his music entrance, and it's the greatest thing in the world. It's a different period of your life.
You have a really creepy look into the internal of my life in college. I'm just telling you that right now. So it's I think a lot of the ECW audience got contact high simply based on the residue coming out of the exhales of most people in our arenas in the 1990s. and if not, it's not like Van Dam wasn't known. Rob Van Dam wasn't known to participate or partake in a tailgate party every now and then, where at all times it was 420. It was always 420 for that guy. There was never a time when it wasn't 420. The clock just stopped.
Hey, may we all have as much peace of mind and internal zen as Rob Van Dam has achieved in his life.
With that said, April 2nd in Orlando, we have a tremendous WrestleMania event coming up. Of course, Brock Lesnar in the main event against Goldberg. This is such an intriguing rivalry because it goes back so far. We talk about the Attitude Era and afterwards, and the rivalry that's gone on between Brock and Goldberg. This is such an intriguing main event, and I really enjoyed the build up to this. This is it kind of felt like it was all building towards a crescendo, and you could tell when there's a great story or a great thing going on in professional wrestling, when it builds towards something you can when you just can't wait to see it coming, and that's what this WrestleMania main event feels like for me.
Well, and that's how it feels like to us too. It's been a very interesting run with Goldberg, because I don't think a lot of people saw the enormity of his popularity in coming back. And we just had a huge superstar come back last year or 2 years ago in Sting, unfortunately, Sting got injured by Seth Rollins, or in his match with Seth Rollins, and that kind of deflated a bubble, because once Sting got injured in the match, a lot of people started saying, "Hey, I don't know if we should be looking for these great moments of legacy stars. We don't want to cause a situation where it's just a bunch of nostalgia, and having these guys compete in the ring a few years past their physical prime is dangerous." And then along comes the opportunity the very next year for Goldberg. And I would presume that a lot of people had in management and et cetera, the same doubts in their mind about Goldberg based on what happened with Sting. And then Goldberg shows up in the absolute most magnificent shape of his life, because the guy works out with studs like Simon Marcus, and I mean he rolls with some heavy dudes, in terms of MMA and taekwondo and Kempo karate. I mean he all these different martial arts, Muay Thai. He's very into Muay Thai. And he shows up lighter, in better shape, better cardio, in every way possible, imaginable. He's in the best shape I've ever seen him in. And we look towards Survivor Series for that, that dream match, Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg. And Goldberg was so explosive, and he looked so good in doing it. and he was crisp in the ring. You know, how a guy takes off 14 years, 12 years, and has no ring rust is beyond me. His timing was perfect, and you know, his message to the audience was heartfelt. He wanted his son Gage to see him wrestle. His wife Wanda had never seen him with 50,000 people chanting the name Goldberg, and he was off to the races. He just came in and was so inspired and motivated that he quickly made you forget the fact that, wow, this guy has not been on television for over a decade, and that he debuted 20 years ago. So he came in as both a star that everyone remembered, and for people that had never seen him or heard of him, he was a brand new star. This really tough-looking guy that took the fight to Brock Lesnar and beat Brock Lesnar in a minute and a half. So now we're off to the races with this great story of the greatest championship comeback in sports entertainment history. And someone comes back after a decade to win the title.
It's a pretty amazing story, and for him to kind of come back in the spotlight. Now, on the flip side with Brock Lesnar, it's so funny. I saw a clip, and I'm sure you probably saw this online. Somehow it made its rounds from the interview he did with Stone Cold on his podcast. Was that last year, I think? Maybe 2 years ago at this point? It's been a while. And he said, that Brock said, you know, he just really doesn't like people. He doesn't really like being around people. He can perform in front of 20,000 people, but he doesn't really like being in crowds of people. Now, I could never imagine where Brock would think that, but it's funny, for a guy who does like his seclusion, he does like his privacy, Brock is always in the news. Brock always has something going on that keeps him in the news, whether it's UFC, whether it's WWE, whether it's, whatever he's done throughout his career. It's so funny. A guy that does like his seclusion and his privacy has always been such a star, literally from college. From the day he stepped onto the wrestling mats at Minnesota till now, he's really never stepped out of the spotlight for very long.
Well, here's the thing. His job to him is a job. It's just that. It's a job. And his job to him is no different than his job when he's when he's on his farm and he's farming and he's combining. Not that I know what combining is, but when I speak to him, I say, "What'd you do today?" And he says, "Oh, today was great. I was combining." So whatever combining is, he really enjoys doing it. But to him, his job is no different than a mailman that delivers mail, or a garbage man that picks up garbage, or the host or a hostess at a restaurant, or he doesn't have the concept in his head that his job is any different than anybody else's. His job being in athletics and or entertainment, or a combination of the two, requires him to do his job in front of millions of people watching at home and the anywhere between 10 and 100,000 people watching live. In terms of still being in the news as he approaches his 40th birthday, I would suggest that Brock is really now in his physical prime, because he was robbed of reaching his full potential as an athlete in his 20s and early 30s by diverticulitis. So if you look back at his career, by the time he was in the NCAA Division I heavyweight championships, he was already suffering from diverticulitis. His body, which was so fine-tuned, and he had done so much to train his body to accomplish the goals that he envisioned for himself, his body was suppressing and using up so much energy and so much of his strength and his ability to suppress the diverticulitis, and finally the diverticulitis couldn't be suppressed. Probably had it throughout his entire college career. So you never saw him at his full potential in college. You never saw him at his full potential in his first run in WWE. He went into the Minnesota Vikings camp not only with the diverticulitis inside of his system, but a broken jaw and a fractured pelvis, which he covered in the book that we wrote together. And then you never saw him ever, not once, did you see him in UFC at his absolute physical peak. Either he was openly battling diverticulitis, or he didn't even realize that his body was exerting so much energy to fight off the diverticulitis. So this run in WWE really is the first time he's ever been completely healthy in his life. So in his late 30s, and as he approaches early 40s, I would suggest to anyone that Brock Lesnar is right now at his utmost, at his A1 level physical peak. So of course he's going to be in the news, because he's going to exploit the opportunities that his athleticism, which is far beyond anybody else's, that anybody else has to offer, that his athleticism provides him to support his family. So of course he's going to be in the news.
This might sound like a strange question, Paul, but I'm going to ask it anyways, because I'm not going to sit here and profess to know Brock nearly as well as you do. I've interviewed him maybe 6 or 7 times. Obviously, I've been to his fights, and I've seen him, of course, in WWE, live and on TV numerous times throughout his career. A job is a job, and I understand that. So when I ask this question, I'm taking the family aspect, the hunting aspect, and the farming aspect out of his life, because I know Brock truly loves those things. But the joy I saw on Brock's face at UFC 200 after seeing him win and seeing that genuine smile, and I know it's a different feeling than 100,000 people in Dallas Cowboys Stadium or in the Orlando Stadium on April 2nd. But where do you see Brock with the most joy on his face, when he gets the most joy out of his occupation? Is it wrestling? Wrestling is in collegiate wrestling? Is it pro wrestling? Is it fighting? Because that spark in his eye I saw at UFC 200, I sat there at the post-fight press conference and I thought, man, this guy is just loving this moment right now.
Well, there's a lot behind that as well. I mean, that was a great personal achievement for Brock Lesnar, because he obviously did not like the way his UFC career ended. No one comes back to the octagon after a layoff like that to fight a top 10 heavyweight, let alone a head-hunting number 8 contender like Mark Hunt, who was on a roll at the time, take the fight on relatively short notice, which had a lot to do with the UFC Conor McGregor fallout. And, to me, I think a lot of people were looking at that as almost like, the very first Rocky movie, where you have to sit there and take a moment and say, hey, if I just survive, if I go the distance, it's a victory. That was never going to be enough for Brock. He was hell-bent to win that fight and to prove to himself, along with the rest of the world, that nothing can beat him. Not even diverticulitis, which has taken down some really top athletes over the years. And to walk away from UFC in 2000 and at the very end of 2011, and come back in 2016 and fight Mark Hunt, who was just coming off a string of great performances, and to win that fight, and to not get knocked out by Mark Hunt, and to contain Mark Hunt, and even to stand toe to toe with Mark Hunt. That was such a victory for Brock, and to Brock, it was a victory over the one opponent that he never had a chance to exact revenge on, and as quirky as this may sound, that opponent was diverticulitis.
And I don't want to take the attention away from WrestleMania, April 2nd, amazing event, but I want to ask, because, a lot of people who listen to this are going to be UFC fans, because obviously it's what I do primarily with my day job is UFC. We know that after everything that happened last year and going into this year, that Brock had told the UFC that he was retiring again. I don't believe it. I still think Brock will come back and fight again. Brock far better than I do, probably far better than most people do. In your head, do you truly believe Brock is done with fighting? Because I don't. I really don't.
I don't know what Brock is done with in life and what he's not done with in life at the moment. Right now, he is ecstatic over what we have envisioned for this year in WWE. And I think he's very challenged by the concept that he and I have talked about. And I think he's looking at that with a lot of passion and a lot of excitement, because we'd like to take the Brock Lesnar character into places that he hasn't been before, which is what we've been doing with this whole run with Goldberg. I mean, for me to come out on television and talk about how Brock feels compelled to avenge this loss, how Brock's never faced loss before, how Brock was embarrassed and humiliated by being defeated by Goldberg in a minute and a half. These are words that I've never used in the 15 years that I've been his advocate on WWE TV, in the fact that I co-wrote his autobiography with him. I've never used the words embarrassed or humiliated. And so we took his character this year a little bit in a direction that has never been before, and I think we're going to build on that in 2017. In the same way, Brock is, in his heart, a trained competitor. Now, whether that means he's going to look at this environment and say, hey, you know what? I didn't make the Vikings team in 2004, but I bet in 2017 I can. And just because I can, I'm going to, just to show people that I want to, and I take it. Because, when we named him the Conqueror, that's what he is. He's just he's a legit conqueror. You put a task before him, and he conquers it. So I really can't tell you that it's out of the realm of possibility for Brock Lesnar to say, I'm taking a few months off from WWE. I want to see how many home runs I can hit for the Minnesota Twins. And people may laugh at that, but it's the same people that laughed at him in 2004 when he went for the Vikings camp, and he was the last person cut, and that's with a broken jaw and a fractured pelvis and diverticulitis. So I think what's next for Brock Lesnar, besides what's happening in WWE, could it be UFC? Could it be another sport? I think it's something that he's going to look at and say, I bet no one thinks I can do that. All right, I'm going to conquer that. And it's the same thing that's, besides obviously the greatest payday of his life, it's the same thing that's motivating McGregor to wanting to fight Mayweather, because admittedly, I would say, not that I know Conor McGregor, because I don't. I'd have to say that a great deal of that is obviously the lure of the enormous payday, but a lot of it has to also be the lure of, you know what? People think I can't take this guy, and I can take this guy. And in the same way, I think that it's the same thing to be said for Mayweather. I think Mayweather was 100% honest when he said, I'm done. 49-0, This is my last fight. I'm out. I'm going to be a promoter. I want to get out while I'm on top, and I don't know how long I'll be. I'll be at my peak physical skills, so let me get out while I'm the best that there is in the world without a dispute available for anybody to argue against me. And I'm sure Mayweather's looking at this like, this is the most ridiculous payday. I bet you Mayweather makes more off of this fight if and when it happens than he did over the Pacquiao fight. So I'm sure that's a big lure for Mayweather. But I'm also thinking that Mayweather, as an athlete, misses the competition. He yearns for it. He's jonesing for it. He's addicted to it. And the only competition he has now is, whether the roulette wheel hits black or red. So Mayweather's sitting there, and here's a guy that's running his mouth, and here's a guy that says, I can take him. And Mayweather's looking at not only the money, but he's saying, oh, really? And people are actually giving the case that because you're a southpaw and because you're this and you're active and you're 27, you can take me? I'll fight this guy. Of course I will. So it's the same thing with Brock. It's not just looking at UFC and then he'll say, you know what, I at my worst, beating me cost Cain Velasquez 14 months of his career. When I was not 100% healthy, I beat the greatest heavyweight of all time, Randy Couture. When I came in for UFC 100, I was fighting a guy that had a psychological advantage over me because he tapped me out, and he was a former UFC heavyweight champion in Frank Mir, and I pummeled him. And at the same time, Brock could look at that and say, I want that again. But also, he may look at something else. Hey, he may do race car driving. I don't know. You never know with him, because what's going to happen is something's going to trigger that. He's going to be sitting there one day and looking at something, and someone's going to say, yeah, can you imagine how hard that is to do? And he'll just look over and say, not for me. And they'll go, oh, come on. You can't go one-on-one with LeBron James, or you can't put on ice skates and score a goal against an NHL goaltender. And he'll sit there and he'll say, yes, I can, because I'm Brock Lesnar. And that'll be a task that he goes out to conquer, because that's who he is. 100% legitimate, genuine, authentic conqueror.
I love it. Paul, you are, and I think most people would agree, the master of the promo. I know you hear this constantly. You see it on Twitter all the time. Whenever you step into a ring and grab that microphone, you have one of the most captive audiences in the world. But you've been around You've been around professional wrestling your entire life. You've been around, different trends. You obviously work with your advertising agency. I'm curious because we're getting ready to go into WrestleMania. I believe it was last year, maybe it was 2 years ago. I can't remember the exact timeline. I think it was 2 years ago. In the middle of Brock's match with Roman Reigns, he's tossing him around the ring, and the spotlight's on him, the cameras are on him, the microphones are on him. At one point, he says, "Suplex City, bitch." And everyone kind of loved that moment, and it was great. But now Suplex City is Brock's moniker. That is so huge. I mean, is it one of those things, and I guess my question is this, can you even predict sometimes what's going to catch on with a professional wrestling audience or a UFC audience? I mean, audiences in general, it's not just one audience, but like something like that kind of seems such in the moment. But now, when you think of Brock Lesnar, you think a lot of things. But when you think of professional wrestling, immediately Suplex City comes to mind, and that was such a just a random moment in a match.
The reason why it caught on is because it was a random moment. It was obvious that it was unscripted. It was obvious that it was improv. It was obvious that it was in the passion and the heat of the moment that Brock blurted that out because he felt it. It was real. It was authentic, and that's why it caught on. If we had planned that out, it would never have caught on that way. It was obvious to the audience this was something real that he felt, and therefore they wanted in on that. It's not really a marketer's job to figure out with 100% accuracy what's going to catch on. It's a marketer's job to innovate and to develop and experiment. And the real job is when you start to see something catching on, you exploit it to the max. That's what a marketer's job is. To see the trends as they start to unfold and realize this is going to blow up.
I agree. With that being said, we have WrestleMania coming up on April 2nd. There's a lot of things to talk about with this card and obviously with Brock in the main event. But I'm curious, Paul, because you're a bit of a professional wrestling, not only a historian in a way because you've been around the sport so long. But one of the things that's most intriguing to me right now as far as the marketing, as far as the promotion goes going into WrestleMania is women's professional wrestling. I'm such a huge fan of what WWE has done recently, giving people like Sasha Banks and Charlotte and some of these other, folks a chance to shine. I'm curious your thoughts on that trend and what you're seeing out of women in professional wrestling. It's so much different. I grew up on Wendy Richter, in WWF back in the day, and then transitioning to that to Trish Stratus and Lita and things like that. But now, I love what they're doing, and I love the attention it's getting, especially on an event like WrestleMania.
Well, I think WrestleMania is the right thing for you to mention because I envision a day where a women's match main events WrestleMania. And I think the female to bring the women's division to that prominence is Charlotte. No doubt in my mind. She is a true game changer, not just for the women's division, but for the industry in and of itself. I think when Trish Stratus and Lita broke the mold and turned up the heat on the women's division and paved the way for this crop of athletes that have come in and truly both revolutionized and evolved the presentation of women's wrestling. And I think also Natty Neidhart, does not get the credit that she deserves for being at the forefront of that movement. But Charlotte, to me, is the prototype of where women's wrestling is going to go. And in the same way that anybody who was watching Strikeforce in the infancy of women's MMA of the women's MMA explosion, and you saw Gina Carano followed by Cyborg, followed by Misha Tate, and then the global popularity of Ronda Rousey. I think it's the same way in WWE. I think Trish and Lita paved the way. I think that Natalya set a standard in terms of work rate, and then came in this crop from NXT with Sasha Banks and Bayley and everyone else. But Charlotte is in a league of her own, and I can't even tell you that I think she's one of the best women's wrestlers I've ever seen in my life. I think she's just one of the best wrestlers I've ever seen in my life. And I don't think the global audience has come to realize her potential as a worldwide attraction yet. And they will. And at that time, I think she has the potential to be the first female in a main event match at WrestleMania.
I agree. I absolutely agree with you. During that, you mentioned a name. I was going to bring this up anyway, so this is a perfect segue for this. I know beyond professional wrestling, you do pay a lot of attention to, UFC and to mixed martial arts. the name Ronda Rousey has come up a lot because a lot of people, including Dana White, have said they believe that she is going to retire. Now, she's dabbling in acting. She just finished a role on the NBC series Blind Spot, so she's doing some stuff like that. But a lot of people still believe Ronda's future will be in WWE. We know she's a huge professional wrestling fan. We know she obviously appeared at WrestleMania a couple of years ago. Paul, what's your opinion on Ronda Rousey, not only in her future, but what kind of star potential would she have if she came to WWE tomorrow?
Well, I think the WWE audience would embrace Ronda Rousey with open arms. She is, just her name recognition alone is huge. It doesn't matter her past two experiences in UFC. All that matters is if she got involved in a story that people could relate to and could sink their teeth into and could get excited about. I would personally pay to see Charlotte versus Ronda Rousey. I would personally pay to see Stephanie McMahon versus Ronda Rousey for a completely different reason, but why digress? I think Ronda Rousey doing anything in WWE is a natural fit. I'd love to see it, and would be happy to discuss with her all of the benefits that she could endure by being a Paul Heyman girl.
I think that would be a perfect fit, and I think of all the things that Ronda has in her future, and she has a lot of options. We know that. I mean, outside of fighting, there are options, but I feel like WWE and professional wrestling would be the best for her because it's a little bit of everything. It's that athleticism that she clearly has. It's the prowess and the popularity that she's already carrying in. Working with someone like yourself would only be, kind of excel her. And when you mentioned that, I was actually going to say this. Imagine Ronda Rousey versus Charlotte headlining a WrestleMania. I got tingles down my spine just thinking about it.
I assure you, I feel the same way.
It would be amazing. It would be absolutely amazing. And I hope it happens. I really do.
Hey, I tell you what. I mean, there are other women in WWE. It's not just Charlotte that could probably provide a compelling main event against Ronda Rousey. Look at Nia Jax. I mean, you talk about someone that could truly make you believe she could kick Ronda Rousey's ass. Nia Jax is an impressive performer and a hell of an athlete as well. So it's not like Charlotte is the only one capable of being paired up against Ronda Rousey. There are others as well. The women's roster in WWE right now is unparalleled in the history of pro wrestling or sports entertainment. There's never been a women's roster like this. There's never been talent depth like this ever. So it's an extraordinary time if you're a fan of the athletic presentation that can be brought forth on a WWE program. It's an extraordinary time for the women.
Yeah, I agree. Paul, let me pivot to this because we talk about, doing, the promo work that you do, which is amazing, best in the business. And it's an art form that a lot of people feel like has, changed a lot and maybe even not been as good over the years. And that's why we appreciate a great promo that comes from a person like yourself. We hear some of the other people that I watch and I enjoy. I think Kevin Owens does a great job in promos. And we see promos a lot in other sports. I mean, especially in, of course, the sport I cover, mixed martial arts. What are your thoughts on the art of the promo in this day and age, not only for professional wrestling, but for other sports? Because I say this all the time to fighters I speak to. I say you have 15 minutes in a cage, which is what all eyes are going to be on you, but you also have umpteenth amount of days and time before that to get people to pay attention to you, and that's where interviews and promos and things like that come from. Am I wrong in thinking that the art of the promo is still such an important part of wrestling and such an important part of mixed martial arts and boxing, and I think other sports can take advantage of that as well. It's a little bit of a lost art these days in a way, because certain people get it. Conor McGregor gets it. Obviously you get it, but I still think that it's something that is vastly underused, I guess is the best way I could say it.
Well, what's happened is that people have lost focus. And I don't just mean the performers, but also those that design what is to be said. It always goes back to me to three crucial points. Who are these people? Why are they fighting? And why, as a consumer, should I care? Now, if you can answer who these two people are, okay, hey, well, my client is Brock Lesnar. Here's what makes him special. My name is Conor McGregor. Here's why I'm different than everybody else. I'm Floyd Mayweather. This is why I rule boxing. Okay, who are these people? Why are they fighting? Well, I'm fighting because I have nothing else to do on a Saturday night. Well, that's not going to sell a lot of tickets. I'm fighting because I'm emotionally challenged by the concept of fighting this guy at this time in my life, at this point in history, because he pisses me off. Ooh, I'm interested in that. The mere notion of coming out of retirement, if I'm Mayweather, the mere notion of crossing into boxing, if I'm McGregor, these are catalysts for interest that will entice someone to want to see the fight. So that's why they're fighting. And why should I care to see it? Why should I care enough to buy a network subscription, pay for a pay-per-view, fly to a city and witness the event live? Well, because it's history in the making. Because that's my favorite fighter. Because this means so much to him or to her. Because people will be talking about this for years to come. Okay, now I've answered the questions. Who are these guys? Why are they fighting? Why should I, as a consumer, care? And if you can answer those three questions, you've sold a ticket or a network subscription or a pay-per-view. And if you don't answer those three questions, you're not making the sale. So many promos today are designed only to define the personality delivering the promo, or it's not a genuine reflection of the authentic personality. How many guys in MMA are trying to be Conor McGregor now, and they're falling flat on their face doing it? Because they're just trying to copycat McGregor, and with these rapid-fire insults and punk everybody else out, and it just doesn't work, because it's not who they are. It's just not who they are. And without getting into politics, because I have stayed away from the political arena, but it's like when Marco Rubio tried to be an insult king like Donald Trump. It wasn't Marco Rubio, and you could tell how inauthentic it was. And because he was being disingenuous to himself, it hurt Marco Rubio. So, and I'm not knocking Rubio, I'm just giving that as the picture-perfect example of something on a major stage. So when these MMA guys try to be McGregor, or WWE guys don't play to who they truly are, or a character that can truly live inside of them, the public smells it, and the public knows it, and then the public turns away from it. But it's when someone comes out and that's who they are, or that character, that persona lives inside of them, and they present that to the public, and then they give you a reason to care, and they explain to you the reason for the fight, you got a sale, and you have a major sale, and you have a network subscriber, and you have someone coming to the event, and you have a pay-per-view buy, or a T-shirt sold, or whatever. It's all about making the sale, and it's all about being real when you do it, because today's public sees right through it.
Yeah, I agree. And it's funny because when you create something that people attach themselves to, with Connor in the beginning, it was his his speech. When he came out as the Irish guy, he had that moment where he said, where he came out and said, "We're not here to take part, we're here to take over." And now there's so many Conor McGregor isms that are out there. I saw a tweet you made not too long ago about one of your most iconic phrases: "Eat, sleep, conquer, repeat." It's variations of that, of course. And now Nike is even using it, and I know as a guy who kind of creates he creates an iconic catchphrase like that. One part of you must feel like honored and say, "Hey, people really like this," and then part two is like, "Hey, you might want to pay me if you're going to steal my catchphrase. You're going to pay me if you're going to steal my marketing gimmicks."
Well, it's funny, The wash, rinse, repeat was a L'Oreal or a Clairol thing, back in the 70s. And then Fatboy Slim came out with Eat, Sleep, Rave, Repeat in 2000 and at the very end of 2011, beginning of 2012. And and of all the Fatboy Slim songs, that one didn't catch on, which surprised me because I liked the song. It was a very funny and very catchy song. And we were coming up with a new catchphrase for Brock, and especially looking towards wrestling The Undertaker at WrestleMania. And now this is the end of 2013. And with Brock coming back, I just said, eat, sleep, conquer, repeat. It was just something I said on television. In as part of a 12-minute promo, and it caught on instantly. And then we came out with the shirt, Eat, Sleep, Conquer, Repeat. And I can't take credit for the discovery or for writing out the actual Eat, Sleep, Blank, Repeat, because it was obviously influenced by the shampoo commercial in the 70s and the Fatboy Slim song, but the Fatboy Slim song didn't catch on. And as soon as we went public with it, within weeks, I saw it at Burger King, Eat, Sleep, Bacon, Repeat. And I said, there's no way. This is too much of a coincidence. And then I saw it everywhere. I saw it at fast food places. I saw it at car dealerships. I saw, Eat, Sleep, Dodge, Ram, Repeat. And it was everywhere. I saw it with Nike. I saw it with McDonald's. I saw it with Apple. I saw it with Snapchat. Eat, Sleep, Snap, Repeat. So it became this global marketing term, and I lived through this before in the 90s. I didn't come up with the word extreme, but I came up with it as an adjective for your product in August 1994, and then by the spring of 95, it was everywhere. So chasing down those royalties will be an exercise in futility for me. And it's one of the many things that motivates me to come up with a new phrase and then trademark and copyright it and perhaps then chase the royalties the next time I stumble upon something like this.
But it is kind of, in a way, while the monetary gain would obviously be nice, to know that you make such an impact on pop culture. I mean, that to me, that's history. That's something that will go down in history, just like with Extreme, with that catchphrase. That's part of pop culture history now. The fact that so many, what do they say, imitation is the greatest form of flattery?
Well, I came up with Extreme for ECW in August '94. So I was just about to turn 20. I was still 28 years old. So when you're 28 years old and you realize that you're making history and you've affected pop culture and you have created a global phenomenon, you really enjoy that, and that's a big ego boost, and it's a great calling card. When you're 51, I don't give a damn about affecting pop culture, and I don't give a damn about creating a global phenomenon. Cut me my royalty check, bitches.
I love it. I don't want to take up too much more of your time, Paul, but I do want to ask you, we're talking, so much about WWE and UFC. One guy that I haven't brought up to you yet is CM Punk. Do you still talk to CM Punk on a regular basis? How's he doing?
I those who talk to CM Punk on a regular basis and then tell the world how he's doing don't end up talking to CM Punk on a regular basis. Here's what I'll divulge publicly about CM Punk. It would appear as though he's in a happy place in his life. It would appear as though he is enjoying married life. You can ascertain that from his social media. I would presume to say about CM Punk's going to do what CM Punk wants to do. And he's going to pursue his dreams in his own very unique way, in a manner that he deems ethical and appropriate. And as far as discussing CM Punk publicly, I'll limit myself to that because I think that's all he wants the public to know at this point.
Yeah. You know, I told you about the joy I saw in Brock's face at UFC 200. You know, I know the fight didn't go his way, but ahead of UFC 203, and again, I don't profess to know CM Punk, but I felt the same thing. When you're living your dream, whether it's mixed martial arts or WWE or you're singing on a stage, you can truly see the joy in someone's eyes, and I saw that with CM Punk in that moment. Like, even though the fight didn't go his way beforehand, though, he was loving it. He was loving every minute of that lead up to his first fight, and I guess that's ultimately all that matters. When you're enjoying what you're doing and you can express that, that's all that really matters. So whether it's pro wrestling, WWE, UFC, whatever it was, and I saw that with CM Punk. He seemed like he truly was in that moment. He enjoyed that moment.
It's about pursuing and living your dreams. And both of these industries, UFC and WWE, and in many other ways, you know, Major League Baseball, NHL, hockey, NBA basketball, soccer or football outside of the United States, someone who dreams of being an actor or an actress. These are avenues by which people have dreams their entire lives, and the businesses and the sports allow them to pursue their dreams. So when you get to watch, almost as a voyeur, someone living out their dreams, of course you're going to see how ecstatic they are, because this is all someone has envisioned for either 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 5 years, or their entire lives. So when someone's doing something, they have envisioned this concept their entire life, let alone, or even if they've only envisioned this moment for the past 18 months. Every day of training, every day you had to throw up in a bucket. Every day, so some other guy in training choked you out. Every day that you were too sore to get out of bed, but got out of bed anyway. And all the sacrifices you make in terms of dieting, et cetera, et cetera. When you get to live out these dreams, and you get to live that moment that you have done, that you have envisioned, that makes the sacrifice worth it, well, then people get to see a genuine look on your face in which you can't constrain it. You can't hide the fact that you are euphoric, that you are exhilarated, that this is the moment that you have envisioned for yourself over the course of however long a period of time.
So for you, Paul, what is that for you? At this stage in your career, at this stage in your life, what is that moment for you? What is the thing that gets you most euphoric, to get you in that dreamlike state where you're like, I can't believe I'm here right now and I get to do this?
Professionally, trying to be the verbal equivalent of what Brock Lesnar brings physically to a WWE presentation. Because if I can't hype it to the extent that he can deliver it, and then if I can't review it as enormous as with the magnitude that he delivered it the night before, then I'm not doing my job. And you have to give it a an aura of importance and relevance and historical relevance beyond just, well, if you missed what my guy did last night, then you're really shit out of luck because, oh, man, did you miss it? Brock Lesnar was great. That ain't going to cut it. I have to leave you with the understanding that Brock Lesnar in a ring is a very special event. And the fact that he's, for example, on April 2nd at WrestleMania, but it doesn't have to be that particular performance. It's any performance in which he's in a match. It just so happens the one that we're talking about now is WrestleMania. But the night after I'm challenged by any interview I have to do promoting WrestleMania, and I'm even more challenged by what happens on Monday, April 3rd on Monday Night Raw, when I will have to go before a global audience and describe what took place and why Brock Lesnar is head and shoulders above everybody else and why his performance the night before was of historical significance and one that you will want to brag about witnessing for the next 25 to 50 years.
And we get to see another one of those moments on April 2nd, WrestleMania. Brock Lesnar against Goldberg in the main event. Every WrestleMania is special, but I feel like Brock headlining WrestleMania makes it that much more special because, as you said, when he performs, just like when he was in the UFC, whenever he does it, you want to be there. You want to watch it. You want to witness it. I guess witness is probably my favorite word for it because you're not just watching, you're witnessing. It's like LeBron James, we are witnesses. I feel like that every time Brock performs. We are witnesses to something great because I think you said this about Brock in the past, and I would agree. He's a once-in-a-lifetime athlete, and eventually, one day, he'll slow down. One day, he won't be in the public spotlight, and these are those rare moments that we should enjoy a once-in-a-lifetime athlete performing.
Right, because when he's done, he's going to be done. Imagine if you're a golfing fan, if you're a fan of golf, and I come to you right now and I say, hey, I have a time machine and I can take you back 6-7 years ago when Tiger Woods was at his peak. Or I could take you back, 30 years ago and you can see Jack Nicklaus versus Arnold Palmer. And you go, wow. Oh, man, I'd love to see that. Or I could take you, if you're a baseball fan, if you could actually watch the Yankees versus the Tigers and see Babe Ruth, trying to outdo Ty Cobb and vice versa. If you're a basketball fan and you could see Michael Jordan at his absolute best, or Wilt Chamberlain versus Bill Russell, when all these legends, when all of these athletes, and you read about them and you go, man, what must it have been like to be there that night and witness that happening and participate as a member of the audience? Well, with Brock Lesnar, you have that chance because he is the Wilt Chamberlain, the Bill Russell, the Larry Bird, the Michael Jordan, the Tiger Woods, the Arnold Palmer, the Jack Nicklaus, the Babe Ruth, the Ty Cobb. He is that to WWE. He is Muhammad Ali in Muhammad Ali's prime. He is Mike Tyson when Mike Tyson was knocking everybody out in the first round. That's who he is. He is a historically relevant performer, the likes of which you will never see again and have never seen before. And the proof of the matter is what he did at WrestleMania 30 when he conquered The Undertaker's undefeated streak. Because no one was ever going to get to do that. No one. But Brock Lesnar did. So there's only going to be so many more opportunities because he's not going to be doing this forever. That I guarantee. Absolutely, positively guarantee. And so when you get a chance to see Brock Lesnar, I agree with LeBron. You're witnesses, but I think it goes further with Brock. I think you're a participant because you're a participant in the audience. And that audience always plays a big factor. And it certainly will with Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg. So I think in terms of Brock Lesnar versus Goldberg, you not only get a chance to witness, you get a chance to participate. And that's a rare opportunity for anybody.
I agree. Paul, it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you on the podcast. Obviously, I cannot wait for WrestleMania. Hopefully, I know a couple weeks after that, WWE's coming here to Columbus, Ohio. Hopefully, it'll work out. We'll get to see you and Mr. Lesnar here in town. If that works out, if you do, please let me know. I will be at the show for sure. And thank you for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I know you're so busy, so much going on, and of course, WrestleMania week, days away. So thank you for taking the time to do the podcast. I really do appreciate it.
Seriously, the pleasure is all mine, and I truly have enjoyed your coverage of the Floyd Mayweather and Conor McGregor hype and the reality behind that hype. You've broken a lot of ground with that, and whenever Brock and I or others and I discuss the possibility of McGregor versus Mayweather, you're the reporter of record right now, and it's and I commend you on that. You have my most sincere compliments.
I appreciate that. I very much do. Coming from you, that means a lot. Thank you as always, Paul. I appreciate the time. We will speak soon. Safe travels out to Orlando. Wish Brock the best of luck for me. Not that he needs it. And I cannot wait for WrestleMania April 2nd live on the WWE Network. And thank you again for the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Bye-bye.